Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for a Fireside Chat, followed by a panel discussion. I'm the chair today. My name is Tine Haas. I'm leading the Airports and Aviation division of Dornier Consulting. Dornier is a service provider in the energy and transport sectors. The topic of our Fireside Chat is leveraging data. Data from the customer perspective to optimize Malaysia Airports operation. Please welcome with me Gordon Stewart. Gordon is the Chief Operating Officer at Malaysia Airports. Please join me at the stage. We only have 15 minutes, therefore I will dive right into questions, but hopefully at the end we have a minute left over. If you have a question, hopefully we'll be able to take it. Gordon, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Thank you. Many airports have a challenge to improve their capacity without actually being able to increase the infrastructure.
Yep.
So maybe you can share a little bit about your experience at Malaysia Airports and your approach.
Sure. So I've just been with Malaysia Airports for 1 year. So we're in the kind of planning stage in terms of what we wish to do for that particular challenge. The challenge that we are taking on is I'm actually looking to double our check-in capacity without increasing the physical infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Maybe a little bit about me and the approach I'm doing is originally I'm an industrial engineer, and so I've got very sort of process thinking. So I look at airports from a process perspective. So we've kicked off a project that we're calling Time 26++, and it's an acronym for Terminal Identity, Modernisation and Efficiency. And we're looking to achieve this by 2026 because it's Visit Malaysia year in 2026. And the plus stands for we're not going to do just this initiative in KL, our main airport. We're also going to extend it to our other airports. There's 38 other airports. We've got 39 in total in the group. And also we're not going to stop at 2026. It's a continual improvement process. So the challenge that we're taking on is with a focus on Terminal 1, which is our 26-year-old, to be honest, is a beautiful terminal, and we want to upgrade the capacity in that. And so I want to move, the very end goal or vision I've got is to no longer call it a check-in hall, it's going to be a bag drop hall. And that's really fundamental in trying to understand what the challenge is that we're taking on just now. We're looking at doubling, in theory, doubling our capacity in check-in without doing any construction. Reality is we might get to 70 or 80%, but I'm setting the challenge of double. Now, how do you do that? You do it by splitting the process. I'm not telling you anything that's new or innovative here. There's lots of airports that are doing this, but a two-step check-in process is key to this. The first step is check-in, the second step is bag drop. So we're looking to move the check-in process away from the check-in hall and just leaving it as a bag drop area. The way that we're doing this is analysing data. So originally, or a long time ago, I was a Lean Six Sigma black belt. And so again, I'm bringing this skill set into airport operations. And I'm trying to keep it simple and keep to the basics. And the basics is I want to create a bag drop hall and remove check-in. I want to optimise the process. So how do we optimise our process? We're looking at timing. So I'm getting data on timings of all of our different airlines. I'm doing analogies with my staff, which is maybe not quite 100% correct, but it's kind of like airlines are like ice cream, and you can't treat them as vanilla. There's different flavours of airlines, and they've got different operations. So there's slightly different check-in processes, slightly different passenger profiles, and we need to accommodate that. So we're in the process just now of gathering data on our airline passenger profile. So every single airline that uses our check-in hall, we're gathering data on type of aircraft they're using, number of passengers, split of passengers between transfer and O&D, the profile of passengers with visas and without visas requirements, because that's really critical when it comes to using technology at the moment. If you have to get a visa checked, then it's a manual process at the moment, versus being able to, with no visa requirements, you can use the CUS kiosks. So CUS kiosks are the real game changer for us. They've been around for a long while, but the utilization of them is the real game changer. So taking a 2-minute check-in process and splitting that 1 minute for bag drop and 1 minute for the self-check-in on the CUS kiosk. And that's essentially the core of what we're doing. I'm conscious I've been talking for a long time, so I'll let you ask another question.
It's interesting to listen to you. I understand you have quite the structure in terms of your passengers. You have a lot of groups that you have to deal with, and this somehow also shapes your approach to the design of the space and the facilities you are providing.
Yeah, so I got some I've been around for a while. This isn't that's not my first rodeo, and I've worked in a few airports now. And one of the things I found quite unusual or unique or different about Malaysia and KL in particular is we have a very large group passenger profile, mainly from religious travel to Hajj and Umrah to Saudi. But we also have a lot of groups coming from China and other parts of Asia where they travel in groups. And it's between, at different times of year, it accounts for between 10 and 20% of our passenger profile. Classically, the way that an airport process, so check-in, security search, immigration, these checkpoints in the process, they're classically just designed for 1 or 2 passengers at a time, maybe family at the biggest. Groups behave as a group. They go to check in 20 or 40 packs. They wait until the last passenger has checked in. Then they all move from that to the next process, whether it's boarding card check, immigration. They literally move through as a group. So part of our redesign process is looking at how do we accommodate group design in our terminal? How do we accommodate economy packs, first and business, and then we've clustered family and passengers with reduced mobility together. So we're also looking at gathering data to design the process so that it's not only designed for 1 or 2 packs passing through the departure process, it can also accommodate groups. Don't have the solution to that just yet, so we've defined the problem, but we're in the process now of analysing data. And to give you an example, some of our groups get asked how long before the departure the check-in gates open, check-in desks open, do you think groups turn up? And I said, I don't know, maybe a couple of hours, 4 hours before check-in opens, yeah. Some of them arrive up to 8 and 12 hours before, which is just astounding. And so we've got this issue of we have lots of passengers hanging around in our departure hall. So again, we need to look at that data and understand how do we change that. And ultimately, we'd like them to check in earlier and get through to airside. So again, this is data that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, obviously data is at the heart of this project. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about collaboration with stakeholders. How do you motivate the stakeholders to participate, to dedicate their resources?
Sure. So one of the things that's kind of fascinated me with, I guess as any profession though, is we tend to look at it from our perspective. So if you're an IT guy, earlier on, all the CIOs were sitting up here, and they tend to talk, quite rightly, predominantly from a CIO perspective, right? Or if you're an ops person, you'll talk about things from an operations perspective, right? You cannot do that. right? And this is one of the things that I've been trying to put across. So previously, when I worked in actually Bahrain, one of my colleagues, former colleagues is here, I had IT responsibility, was one of my responsibilities there. And what I've learned over time is that any change that you make in an airport, if I talk about operations, you can't just look at it from an operations perspective. You need to look at it from a customer perspective, and I'll talk about what I mean by customer in a second. You need to look at it from a commercial perspective, which is who's going to pay for this change because somebody has to. Operational and IT. So when I talk about customer and commercial, I'll maybe give you an example. When we look at the different commercial models when you bring in automation, if we put in a self-bag drop as an example, right, who pays for that? Right? At the moment, we as the airport are paying for that, but what we're effectively doing is taking away a cost for the ground handler because they were previously providing a manual labour, a member of staff to do that processing. We're incurring the capital cost and we're incurring the OPEX cost with that. So it's really important that we look at the commercial model as well. Now, in the short term, I'm kind of okay with that because it means I don't need to build another, I want to call it check-in hall, but check-in hall twice the size of what I've got because I'm looking to double my capacity. So there's trade-offs there, but I think if you just jump at anything in sort of isolation, you're kind of missing the point. You need to look at it from, not just from a digital perspective, but you have to start with the customer and say, what's the process? Our aim and our goal is to get our passengers, as soon as they arrive in the terminal, all the way through to airside in a relaxed environment as quickly as possible, because that's just, it's better for the passengers and it's also better for us as well from a flow and from a commercial perspective as well. And if I just finish that off by talking about the acronym I used, which was Time 26, we actually start with the E first, which is efficiency or operational efficiency. That's the basis of our design. You have to design your process from an efficient perspective. Then from an M perspective, modernization, you decide what technology is applicable to get used to help you with your efficiency. And then, because I'm a little bit of my OCD, I like to tidy things up. So the TI bit, which is terminal identity, I don't just want to be slapping an efficient process or a piece of technology into the terminal building. It has to fit in aesthetically as well. So we're also looking at doing an overall redesign of the whole, basically refreshing a 26-year-old asset. But it's important to do all three of these at the same time.
Thank you. And I know that you have also had some experience with biometrics.
Yes.
Maybe you can share a few insights from your perspective.
Sure. So again, in the panel earlier on, they were talking about biometrics. So we've got biometrics. They were installed about 2 years ago. So we've got biometric readers at our boarding card check-in point, and we've got biometric readers at the gate. And this probably brings up another point that I haven't touched on, which, while I was talking about redesigning the check-in process or the bag drop process, you have to do that with the airline. It's the airline's check-in process. And so that really drives your ability to, you can't as an airport just dictate what that check-in process is going to be. The airline owns that process. We need to work with them. So it's the same with biometrics. So in some ways we've gone a little bit ahead with the technology. We've put the physical infrastructure in place, and now we're doing a bit of catch-up with the airlines in terms of engaging them and how we get biometrics as part of the process. Our process just now is we can be independent, so you register. We've got registration totem poles where you can register for biometrics. We keep that data for 3 hours only, and then we delete it. We don't want the responsibility of retaining passenger data. It's optional for the passenger as well, so they can choose to register for biometrics or not if they're not comfortable with that. So then we're looking at, okay, what's the benefits of biometrics? Now, about I don't know, 7 years ago when I was in Bahrain and I had IT responsibility. I was a huge fan of biometrics. I was like, let's go for it, it's the future. Now I've got a more balanced view, which is, it depends. And I think there was, I think it was Christine earlier on from, I think it was Cincinnati Airport, one of the American airports, was saying, who wins? Who wins when you're putting something in? So biometrics, if I look at the use of facial recognition as an e-gate process, is actually slower than using a boarding card, right? It's seconds, but a 4-second saving in a 20-second process is 20%, and that's significant. That's 20% extra capacity. So we're evaluating, what do we want to do there? Do we want to use biometrics, or do we want to use just the boarding card? And the boarding card doesn't discriminate between are you under 12 or not, because under 12s at the moment aren't getting access to biometrics. So I've got an open view about biometrics on whether I'll use them or not. And I was having a conversation with my Six Sigma champion just actually before I came in here. And he's saying, what do you want the answer to be? And I said, I genuinely don't know. It's a trade-off between efficiency. From a process perspective, it's more efficient to use a boarding card. But from a passenger ease, to use the face, and I'm not having to find my boarding card, so the jury's out on that. We'll see what direction we go in the future, but that's the sort of thing that we're evaluating just now.
Thank you. Is there a question for Gordon from the audience? No? Then please help me thanking Gordon for sharing his insights, and because you did such a great job, we let him stay on.